In this video I want to talk about texture operators or TOP. Texture operators are image operators that provide real-time, GPU-based compositing and image manipulation. TOPs can be used for preparing textures, compositing stream images and movies, building control panel elements, manipulation of 32-bit floating point data, and almost any other image task you might have. I want to introduce you to some common and frequently used TOP. The first texture operator I want to show you is Movie File In. Use this operator to load and play pictures or movies into your project. The default image is a banana that you can change from the parameters. Click on the cross beside the file parameter. Then select something from the derivative samples or anything else you want. From the parameters of the movie file in TOP, you can reload, play or pause and the way it played in your project. Also, it's possible to change the speed of videos or image sequences. The other option is Q. With Q, you can set a point to replay the video from that point every time it gets triggered. Go to the Common tab from the Parameters window. Most TOPs have common parameters like this that you can change the resolution based on the original resolution or a custom resolution. The full HD resolution is not available on basic versions of TouchDesigner. Pixel formats are specifications of how the pixels of TOPs are stored. You will use it for some techniques. In the Tune tab, you can specify how your image loads into your project. Then, there is Trim tab. Here you can trim videos by specific frames or seconds and what happens in the trimmed length. In the Image tab, you can change how your file works in the project. You won't work with it commonly. Okay. So, with the movie file in, I just imported a movie from TouchDesigner samples into my project, and I can do processes on it. The next common operator is the Noise TOP. Add operator, and search for noise. And add it to the network. This one generates random images looking like clouds. This TOP has different types that some of them use GPU and some use CPU to process. In the parameters of the noise, you can change the seed that generates new texture, period for the size of the pattern. You have other parameters to change the shape of texture. It's possible to achieve many different textures that would be very useful to create creative patches. Turn off monochrome to have RGB colorful texture. It has one output to get the output noise texture. And it also has two inputs. Different things can be connected to the first one to do different processes, like getting the resolution of an image. By default, if you connect something to this input, it will be added to the input. You can change it from the Output tab in the parameters. The second input is used for a coordinate map that you can create like with ramps. This would shape the texture by determining the positions. In the Transform tab, you can do transforms like scaling or repositioning the noise texture. Each parameter has 3 fields for X, Y and Z. Hold the Alt key and click and move the mouse to change the number slightly. Also, you can do it on the text at the left to do changes for all 3 fields. These changes can be animated and I will show you how later. Attention that here I'm getting the resolution of the noise from my video. If you disconnect it, you will have to set the resolution manually from the Common tab. The next top that I want to show you is the circle top. Add it from the operators to your network and set the resolution. Then go to the circle parameters. Here you can change the radius and move the circle. Then you have options for the colors for the circle itself and the background. An important parameter is the polygon. Turn it on and you will see you can have other shapes but circles with this operator. Increase the sides parameter to get what you want. Many creative visuals could be achieved by combining this with the other operators. In the Output tab, you can choose if it gets resolution from the input or gets combined with it. The next one is the constant top. It is commonly used to create a solid color top image, and you can set the RGB separately. It's useful when you have no element but want a blank screen. Another important top is the ramp. Ramp is a gradient, but it does much more than adding colors. In the parameters, you see some settings like other software to create the gradient. You can add handles to the gradient and change their color individually with their setting. After that, you can change the type of this gradient. Phase is to move the position of gradient, and the period is to set the size of the pattern you made. It's also possible to change how the gradient extends. These were the important tops to generate, and add something to your scene. Now I want to show you some texture operators that do processes on the generated textures. The first one is transform. Add it from the OP Create dialog. This operator translates top images. An error appears here immediately because it needs a source. You can always check this kind of errors and warnings with middle click on this icon and see the error here. To specify a source, connect a texture operator to the input. For example, I use the movie file in. Connect the output of the movie file into the input of this transform top. Open the parameters of the transform and change the parameters. Here you can translate, scale, rotate, etc. In the Tile tab, you can change Extend to Repeat and scale down the image to create a pattern of tiles of the input. It's possible to define limitations for the tiles here. You have the same Common tab as the other tops and the same settings. The next top is the level. Add level top and connect the source. You can use the original video as the source or the operators that have done processes. For example, here I use the transformed video as the source. The level top adjusts image contrast, brightness, gamma, black level, color range, quantization, opacity, and more. In the Range tab, you can clamp values. In the RGBA tab, you can filter each R, G, and B and alpha for the input. The Step tab turns on posterizing, which posterizes the image into bands or stripes. In the Post tab, you have gamma, opacity, and brightness. These are post processes. And like other tops, there is a common tab. So now I have this simple patch with 3 operators. Then add Edge operator. This detects the edges of the input. You can insert operators before the input. Here I add level before the edge. By changing the parameters of this level top, you see the result of changes in the edge top. From the parameters of the edge, you can change the strength of the edge. This is the result of using level and edge operators for a movie file and as the source. Let's turn off the viewer for these operators to reduce resource consumption. The threshold top creates a mat with pixel values set to 0 for pixels below the threshold value, and 1 for pixels greater than or equal to the threshold value. It's used to get or pass the pixels based on RGBA or each individually by changing the RGB parameters. I connect it to the edge operator. See the result. So this edge is created according to the RGB of the source. Change the parameters of the threshold, and see the result in the next operators. Compare the edge after the level or threshold. Then add blur top. This operator basically adds a blur effect to the source. Look at this example. After the blur, add a threshold. You can see how the operators affect each other. In this example, blur reduces the details and they don't appear in the threshold. So these were the common tops that do processes on their input. Then there are operators to work with, some operators with each other. The first one is the composite. Composite top has a bigger input. That means you can connect several sources to it. For example, I connect these two to the input. Composite top has different operations and the default is multiply.by enabling the preview grid. You can see the result of all operations with different input orders in one frame. Experiment with the parameters to get an interesting result. Let's add another source to the input. To see the effect, I have to add an operator for this new source before the composite input. I add transform and increase the scale and move it. Well, with these texture operators I got this abstract visual from a video source. Another useful top is LookUp. The LookUp top replaces color values in the top image connected to its first input with values derived from a lookup table created from its second input. For example, I want to connect the first video with my result of operations. I recommend using null for before the inputs. By this, you can connect your sources but still can add operators before the null. So I connected these two into the inputs of the lookup. And this is the visual resulting of that. You can change the value of replaced color from the parameters. You can use any top for the inputs. Here I keep the original video. And the ramp you previously made for the second input. Make the ramp simpler to see how the lookup exactly affect on its inputs. Try using different inputs or create chains of these operators with different parameters to achieve creative visuals. Don't forget chaining effects, and using them more than one time in one path. Here I added another composite top. Another commonly used top is left yet. Add Displace top. The Displace top will cause one image to be warped by another image. It also has two inputs, and the order of them is important. Reduce the Displace weight to a small number, and see how two inputs work with each other. Turn on the Displace for the Displace and its inputs, then compare them. In source midpoint you can define the center of where Displace works on it. 0.5 is the center of the screen. To have better view of the display for the operators, turn off Display. Split the pane layout. In one of them right-click and from the display, turn off the backdrop tops. Now if you turn on the displays for each operator, it appears in the right pane. Try experiment with the parameters and get what you want. You have to practice the workflow and remember the operators to be able to use proper operations when needed. This is my patch for now. Also, I suggest you use annotations to organize your patch. By pressing Alt and Windows and then drag your mouse. Get output of your patch. Until the next week with introducing SOPs.